I turned 60 this year, and it feels like I've been dropped into someone else's body. My knees complain when I stand up, my back has opinions about every chair I own, and the kid at the grocery store calls me sir, with the kind of concern usually reserved for the very old or very lost. I live alone in a small apartment that still has boxes from my divorce 5 years ago. I work part-time at a hardware store, nod along to customers half my age, and go home to frozen dinners and whatever documentary puts me to sleep fastest. People talk about their golden years. Mine feel more beige. Most nights are quiet enough that my brain starts replaying old scenes I never asked to see again. There's one in particular that never really leaves. A cramped student apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and cheap incense. A girl sitting on a second-hand couch. And me, 20 years old and already a world-class coward. Her name was Emma. She was my first real love, and I walked out on her like she was nothing. I met Emma when I was 19 and pretending I had a plan. She worked evenings at this crappy campus cafe where the coffee tasted like burned mud. But she drew little stars on the paper cups, and somehow that made it feel special. I was the guy who studied there mostly, so I could watch her switch between rolling her eyes at annoying customers and smiling at old ladies like they were family. She was studying nursing back then. Said she wanted to do something useful, which made my undecided major feel even more pointless. Emma had this calm energy that made everything seem fixable. Exams, family drama, broken sinks in that awful apartment of hers. She'd just sigh, tie her hair up, and deal with it. We ended up together almost by accident. Late nights, shared fries, me walking her home for safety, even though the campus was fine. One day she just slipped her hand into mine, and it felt so obvious I wondered how we hadn't done it sooner. For nearly 2 years, she was my person. We talked about moving in together after graduation, maybe leaving our crappy town. She kept saying, "We'll figure it out." And the closer figuring it out got, the more I panicked. By spring of my junior year, the walls felt like they were closing in. Emma was talking about future apartments, internships near each other, us in a way that sounded solid and grown up. Meanwhile, I still felt like a kid wearing an adult costume 2 sizes too big. Every time she mentioned long-term plans, something inside me twisted, fear mostly, though I told myself it was practicality. I kept imagining becoming my father. Stuck, angry, convinced he'd ruined his life by settling down too early. One Wednesday afternoon, I walked to her apartment rehearsing a speech I'd pieced together from half-truths and cliches. When she opened the door, smiling like she always did, holding 2 mugs of coffee, the words dried in my throat. But I forced them out anyway. "We want different things," I told her. "I need space. I'm not ready for all this." It was awful. She didn't scream, didn't chase me. She just sat down on the edge of her bed, shoulders sinking like someone had quietly let the air out of her. I remember her whispering, "If you're leaving, then go." So I did. And for 40 years, that moment has lived in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow and couldn't spit out. Life didn't turn out dramatic, just ordinary in the way that sneaks up on you. I got a mediocre job out of college, married someone nice but not right for me, raised a son who thankfully inherited his mother's common sense, and drifted into middle age before I realized I'd stopped wanting anything new. My marriage ended quietly. No shouting, just 2 people tired of pretending they were still trying. By 60, my world had shrunk to grocery lists, early bedtimes, and the occasional phone call from my son asking if I'd eaten something green that week. Mostly, I existed. Not happily, not miserably. Just in a muted limbo I'd grown used to. Then my doctor retired. My chest had been feeling tight on and off. Stress? Age? Bad posture? So I booked with a new internist at the clinic near my apartment. I didn't think twice when the receptionist handed me a clipboard, or when I sat alone in that cold exam room with its generic motivational poster about heart health. I was scrolling my phone when the door opened. "Mr. Carver?" a woman said. I looked up, and for a moment I honestly thought my brain was failing. It was Emma. Older, of course, more defined around the eyes, hair darker and shorter, but unmistakably, achingly her. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might pass out. 40 years evaporated in an instant. leaving only the version of me who'd walked out of her apartment without looking back. She froze too. A single second. A flicker of recognition. Sharp, undeniable, before her expression smoothed into something professional. "Hello," she said, voice steady. "I'm Dr. Klein. I'll be going over your chart today." Dr. Klein, a new name for a life I knew nothing about. She didn't give anything away after that first flicker. No gasp, no anger, no "wow, look who crawled out of the past." Just calm, clinical movements, washing her hands, checking her tablet, adjusting her stethoscope. I sat there feeling like a man caught in a spotlight he didn't know was on. "Any shortness of breath?" she asked. I swallowed. "Sometimes." She nodded without looking at me. Her professionalism was a wall, perfectly built, and I couldn't tell if she was protecting herself or punishing me by keeping things strictly medical. When she lifted the stethoscope to my chest, her hand brushed my shoulder. A tiny tremor ran through her fingers. She pulled back quickly. Deep breath in. I obeyed like a guilty child. Up close, I could see faint lines around her eyes. Life lived, years survived, worlds built without me. She didn't wear a wedding ring. I noticed that against my will. When she stepped back, she tapped something into the computer. "Your EKG from last month concerned me. I'd like to run another test." "Emma?" I said before I could stop myself. She froze. Slowly, she turned. Her expression wasn't angry, just tired. "Please don't," she said softly. "Not right now." Hearing her voice fold like that, not breaking, just bending, hit harder than any accusation she could have thrown. She straightened, adjusting her coat. "Let's focus on your health, Mr. Carver." Mr. Carver. The formality felt like a door closing, but the tremor in her hand told me the door wasn't locked. When she left the exam room, the silence hit me like a punch. I sat there gripping the edge of the table, paper crinkling under me, heart thudding far too loud for someone who'd been trying to convince himself the tightness in his chest was just stress. Seeing her again cracked something open I'd spent decades plastering over. I told myself for years that Emma had moved on easily, that I was a temporary bruise, not a wound. It made my guilt manageable. But watching her fight to keep her hands steady, seeing the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, it told a different story. One where the past hadn't vanished. One where I had left more damage than I allowed myself to imagine. A nurse came in with paperwork, but I barely heard her instructions. My mind was still in that old apartment of hers, seeing 20-year-old Emma sitting motionless on the edge of her bed while I delivered my coward speech. I remembered telling my best friend back then that leaving her was the right thing. Even at the time, it sounded hollow. Now, for decades later, every word of that breakup replayed in my mind with perfect clarity, like regret had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. My chest tightened again. Not the medical kind, but the emotional kind that radiates from your ribs outward, like your heart is trying to curl in on itself. For the first time in years, I wondered who I might have become if I hadn't run. Not who we would have been together, that fantasy feels too naive, but who I would have grown into if I'd stayed, if I'd learned how to love without sprinting for the exit. When Emma re-entered briefly to hand me a referral slip, her voice was calm, but her eyes avoided mine with surgical precision. "We'll follow up next week," she said. And though the words were neutral, I could feel the echo beneath them. A past neither one of us had truly buried. The follow-up came faster than I expected. An early morning slot opened up, the receptionist said. I knew better. Emma wanted this handled quickly. Whether out of professionalism or discomfort, I wasn't sure. When she walked in, she didn't bother with small talk. "Your scans show early-stage cardiomyopathy," she said, her voice steady but gentler than before. "It's manageable, but we need to start treatment soon." The word cardiomyopathy felt heavy, like it came with its own gravity. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. For a moment she looked at me. Not the chart, not the screen, me, and something softened in her expression. "Stress aggravates it," she added quietly. We both knew there was plenty of that. She typed a note, then paused. "Do you remember the last thing you said to me?" she asked. still facing the computer. The question hit harder than the diagnosis. "Unfortunately," I said, "I've replayed it more times than I'd like to admit." She turned to me. "You said you didn't see a future with me. I thought about that for years." Her voice wasn't accusing, just honest, almost fragile. "I'm sorry," I said. "Truly, I was terrified of everything back then. You didn't deserve any of it." She exhaled, a long breath that seemed to release something she'd been carrying. "I know you were young. I was too. But young doesn't mean harmless." I looked down at my hands. "If I could undo it." "You can't." Her tone stayed gentle, but it left no room for fantasy. "But you can take care of yourself now. Let that be enough." Then, almost against her own will, she added, "You mattered to me, more than you knew." For a moment, time folded, 60-year-old me and 20-year-old Emma existing in the same room, broken in different ways. She cleared her throat. "Let's move forward with your treatment plan." But the way she said it, soft, careful, felt like the first real bridge between us in 40 years. After that appointment, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in my life. The diagnosis scared me, of course. Nothing wakes you up like the word cardiomyopathy spoken by someone who once knew your heartbeat for different reasons. But what unsettled me more was the emotional aftershock of her question. "Do you remember the last thing you said to me?" Of course I did. I'd heard it in my head every time a relationship failed, every time someone got too close, every time I felt myself slipping back into that old defensive instinct to run. Seeing Emma again made all those unrelated choices suddenly look connected. Like beads on a string I hadn't realized I'd been holding for decades. That night, my chest tightened again. Not dangerously, just enough to remind me that both of my hearts, the physical and the emotional one, had taken a beating. I walked around my apartment thinking about the life Emma must have lived without me. Her new last name, the calm authority in the way she spoke, the steadiness I once admired and then fled from. I wondered if she had kids, if she had someone waiting at home, if losing me had been a scratch on her timeline or a fracture she'd grown around. The truth I kept coming back to was this. I hadn't just left a girl. I'd left a future, one I never had the courage to imagine. And somehow, sitting across from her as she explained the condition of my aging heart, I felt 20 again. Frightened, ashamed, and painfully aware of how much she had deserved better from me. My next appointment was the first time Emma didn't look like she was bracing for impact. She greeted me with a small, tired smile, the kind doctors use when they're trying to be human without stepping out of line. Still, it was the warmest expression she'd given me since recognizing who I was. After reviewing my new medication, she closed the folder and sat back. "I think we should be honest," she said. "Not about the past, that's done, but about how this is affecting you now." I nodded, unsure where she was going. She hesitated, then said, "You're not the only one who felt something when we saw each other again." The words hit like a soft hammer, painful but not destructive. She looked down at her hands, thumbs tracing the edge of her coat pocket. "I was married," she said, "for 27 years. Married." The word sat heavy in the air. "He died 6 years ago," she added. "Heart failure. Sudden." My breath caught. "Emma, I'm so sorry." She nodded once, eyes distant. It was the kind of grief that rearranges a person. After that, I threw myself into work. It was easier to care for other hearts than deal with my own. I didn't know what to say. For the first time, I realized that seeing me, someone who had walked away, must have collided strangely with losing someone who never would have. She continued, "When you said my name in that room, it felt like someone opened a door I forgot I'd closed." I swallowed hard. "Is that a good thing?" She gave a sad half-smile. "It's a thing. Not good or bad yet, just real." We sat quietly for a moment. Two people who once shared a life that could have been, now sharing a grief neither of us expected to confess. Finally she stood, smoothing her coat. "Your next adjustment will be in 3 weeks. We'll monitor closely." But then, softly, carefully, she added, "I'm glad you didn't pretend not to know me." And that single sentence stayed with me longer than any medical instruction she'd given that day. The next few appointments felt strangely steady. Not warm, exactly, but less like walking into a storm I deserved and more like approaching familiar ground with caution. Emma had mastered the art of professionalism, but every now and then something slipped through. An amused glance, a gentler tone, the ghost of the girl I once knew. One day, after checking my vitals, she said, "Your numbers are improving. You're actually listening to me." Her voice had that quiet humor she used to have when I tried to fix her leaky faucet with duct tape. "I always listened," I said. "I just didn't always learn." "It's never too late," she replied, though I couldn't tell if she meant my heart or everything else. During that appointment, a sudden power flicker made the lights dim and the machines beep. She startled, just a small flinch, but I remembered that same reaction from years ago whenever thunder shook her old apartment. Reflexive, human. She caught my expression and quickly looked away. "Don't read into it," she said. "I'm not," I lied, but I was. Every gesture, every pause, every shift in her voice felt weighted with history. When she reviewed my chart, she paused longer than necessary before speaking. "You're stable," she said, "but your stress levels remain high. You need to rest more, maybe talk to someone." I considered making a joke, but didn't. "I don't really talk to many people." She gave a small nod. I can tell. Her honesty wasn't sharp, just matter-of-fact, which somehow stung more. She knew me better than most people in my life, even now, even after all these years. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door, fingers resting lightly on the handle. "You're not the same person you were at 20, she said without turning around. "But sometimes you look at me like you're afraid you are." My breath caught. She was right. Before I could respond, she added, "Try not to be." Then she walked out, leaving me in an exam room that suddenly felt smaller, heavier, and somehow, despite everything, a little bit brighter. A week later, I woke at 3 a.m., with my chest tightening in a way that felt different, sharper, deeper, like a fist closing slowly around my heart. Not enough to call 911, but enough to scare me into sitting upright for the rest of the night, clutching my sternum and bargaining with the dark. By morning, the tightness had eased, but fear lingered like a metallic taste. I called the clinic, expecting a nurse to triage me, but Emma herself got on the line. That rattled me more than the pain. "Come in today," she said. No hesitation, no formalities, just a clear directive. "I don't want you waiting." Hearing "I don't want" from her again did something complicated to my breathing. When I arrived, she didn't bother with the usual distance. She walked in briskly, irritation written across her face. Not at me, but at whatever was happening inside my chest. "You should have called last night," she said, checking the monitor hookup with quick, precise movements. "I didn't want to bother." "You're not bothering me," she snapped, then immediately softened. "That's not how this works, John." Hearing my first name felt both comforting and terrifying. The EKG ran, printing out a thin strip of data that she studied with a crease between her brows. "You're okay," she said finally, "but this could have gone differently. You need to take episodes like that seriously." There was a tremor in her voice, small but unmistakable. Concern. "Emma," I said quietly, "I'm scared." Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time, she didn't hide her reaction. Pain flickered there, a familiar kind, the kind from long ago, mixed now with something heavier. "So am I," she said. That admission settled between us like a third presence in the room. She adjusted my dosage, wrote instructions, then lingered by the counter, fingers tapping lightly. A nervous habit I remembered from our college days. "You were the first person I ever pictured a future with," she said suddenly, voice low. "And the first person who taught me that futures aren't guaranteed." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry I was the one who taught you that." She nodded once. "I know," but her eyes, God, her eyes, told me she was remembering everything too. At my next appointment, something between us had shifted. The air felt less clinical, less scripted. She sat down instead of standing, closed the exam folder instead of hiding behind it. For the first time in 40 years, we were just two people in a room with the truth hovering between us like a fragile truce. "I've been thinking," she began carefully, "about whether it's good for either of us that I'm your doctor." Panic shot through me. "If you want me to switch, I understand, but that's not what I mean." She shook her head. "I'm not uncomfortable treating you. I'm uncomfortable pretending the past didn't happen." That stopped me cold. She continued, "When I was younger, I didn't understand why you left. I thought love was supposed to be enough to keep people from running." She paused, choosing her words. "But losing my husband taught me something different. People leave for all kinds of reasons: choice, fear, circumstance, death. I had to learn the difference." She stared down at her hands. "You leaving me, it shaped me more than I wanted to admit. I became careful with people. Too careful. My husband used to tease me that I loved cautiously, like I was rationing it." My throat tightened. "Emma, if I could go back." "You can't," she said softly, not unkindly. "Neither of us can. But we can decide what to do with what's left." Silence settled, not heavy, but thoughtful. Finally, she asked, "Why did you leave, really?" "Not the excuse. The truth." Took me several breaths to answer. "I loved you," I said, "and the idea of hurting you later scared me more than hurting you then. I thought running meant I could outrun who I was." I shook my head. "It took me 40 years to realize I carried that version of myself anyway." She let out a slow exhale, sad, but freeing somehow. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me the truth this time." Then she smiled. Not the bright one I remembered from her 20s, but something quieter, wiser, and somehow warmer. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was finally being honest with someone. Maybe even with myself. Vuskazale. That night, after our conversation, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear this time, but from something more complicated, relief mixed with grief for things I never allowed myself to feel fully. I sat at my kitchen table with the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence and realized there was still something I needed to say to her. Something that didn't belong in an exam room. So I wrote a letter. Not dramatic, not poetic, just honest. I told her I'd spent my entire adult life avoiding the version of myself who'd hurt her, pretending he was gone. I wrote that seeing her again forced me to acknowledge the truth, that I had shaped my life around running from responsibility, from closeness, from the fear of repeating mistakes. That leaving her wasn't some noble sacrifice. It was the first time I let fear choose my future. I told her I admired her, not nostalgically, but genuinely. The person she became, capable, steady, compassionate, was everything I'd once been too small to appreciate properly. And I apologized without begging, without expectation, without trying to repair something that belonged to a different lifetime. Just sorry. Thank you. I remember. The next week, I brought the letter to my appointment, sealed in a plain envelope. When she walked in, I felt that familiar twinge in my chest. Emotional, not medical. "I wrote something for you," I said, offering the envelope. "You don't have to read it. You don't have to keep it. But it felt wrong not to give it to you." Emma looked at the envelope for a long moment, then took it with both hands, gently, like it was breakable. "Thank you," she said quietly. She didn't open it, didn't ask what was inside, just slipped it into her coat pocket and moved on with the appointment. But something had changed. Her voice was softer, her posture less guarded, her gaze lingering a little longer when she spoke. At the end of the visit, she touched the envelope lightly, almost unconsciously. "I'll read it," she said, "when I'm ready." It was the only reaction I needed. Not forgiveness, not closure, just willingness. And that alone felt like a kind of healing I hadn't known I was waiting for. The next time I saw her, something in the room felt different. Lighter, though neither of us acknowledged it directly. Emma went through the usual checks, but her movements were calmer, less guarded. When she asked about my symptoms, she actually looked at me instead of the chart. It was such a small shift, but after weeks of navigating emotional landmines, It felt significant. At the end of the exam, she closed her folder and said, "I read your letter." My heart rate spiked enough that she noticed on the monitor. She didn't describe her reaction, didn't dissect it or offer some profound, clean conclusion. Instead, she said, "It helped," and somehow that single phrase felt more meaningful than forgiveness. It meant she'd allowed the past to be seen and allowed herself to feel whatever surfaced without turning away. "I didn't write it to fix anything," I said, "just to finally be honest." "That was the right choice," she replied. There was a pause, comfortable for once. She leaned against the counter, arms folded in a relaxed way I hadn't seen since we were 20. "You know," she said, "for years I thought if I ever saw you again I'd feel anger, or nothing at all. But it's neither." "What is it then?" I asked. "A kind of clarity," she said thoughtfully. "We were two young people trying to love with half-built hearts. It was never going to be simple." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I'm glad you don't hate me," she smiled. Not bittersweet this time, but genuinely warm. "You're not the villain in my story, John. Just a chapter one didn't know how to read until much later." It wasn't absolution. It wasn't romantic. It was something steadier, something real. Two people finally allowing their shared history to settle into place without rewriting it. As I left the room, she touched my arm lightly. Not lingering, just a brief, human connection. "Take care of yourself," she said. "Really." And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I would. I walked out of that clinic into a breezy afternoon, the kind where sunlight feels like it's offering you something instead of just landing on your skin. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, just breathing slowly, intentionally, the way Emma had told me to. For the first time since turning 60, I didn't feel old. I felt unfinished in a good way, like life wasn't something that had already happened to me, but something I could still participate in. Emma and I didn't become friends after that. We didn't fall back into anything resembling 20-year-old us. That would have been a fantasy, and a disrespect to the lives we both lived in the years between. But every appointment after that carried a gentle ease, a mutual understanding. She asked about my sleep, my stress, my son. I listened to her advice with the seriousness someone gives a second chance. And little by little, my chest stopped hurting so much. Not just from the medication, though that helped, but from the relief of finally facing the one thing I'd spent decades dodging. Regret is heavier when it has nowhere to go. Meeting her again gave it a place to rest. I won't pretend everything tied up neatly. Real life doesn't work that way. But something inside me settled. A quiet forgiveness. Not asked for and not required, just present. Enough to move forward. Here's what I learned, and what I wish someone had told me when I was 20. You don't outrun your past. You just carry it until it becomes too heavy, and then life, if it's feeling particularly poetic, hands it back to you in a white coat, measuring your heartbeat. If there's someone you hurt and you're telling yourself it's too late to make peace with it, you might be right, or you might be wrong. But avoiding it won't save you. It just builds a wall between who you are and who you could become. If you're young, don't confuse fear with wisdom. If you're older, don't confuse regret with the end of your story. At 60, I learned something I should have known decades ago. The past doesn't disappear, but it can change shape if you're finally brave enough to face it.